Hi, maybe it's just me, but it seems like we're lately living in crazy times where there's just a bunch of troubling stuff going on in the world, pandemic and wars and whatever. And so during these times, I think it is sometimes hard for many people, including myself, to keep focus on your work and to be continuously motivated. So what can you do basically to stay motivated in the face of that sort of adverse, vicious circle of news that impinge upon everybody in the world? And so this video is about that. Well, first of all, the reason this is a problem in doing science is that it may make you think that what you are doing, your daily work, your research, your science, is not relevant. Because chances are it is not directly relevant to the problem that is in the news, right? Because we don't all work on epidemiology and viruses or peace. And so it may come across to you that what I'm doing, does it even matter? Why am I even doing this? And this is, of course, an absolute killer of motivation and focus. And so this is why you need to work on it. And here are some points. First point is, even though it seems like not obvious at first at all, can you make some connection in what your team works on, your research team works on, with what is currently going on? So it seems like sometimes this is a very long shot, and it may also not simply not be possible in all cases. But also for us, I mean, we're a soil ecology lab and work on biodiversity and global change. And so, for example, the pandemic, even though pandemic is kind of like an invasive species and it has some aspect of global change that we did think about, actually did write a paper about that as well. There was not a direct connection with our topic. It's at least biology, let's say. But because we didn't work on epidemiology, we didn't work on viruses, we didn't work on biomedical topics at all. So this was kind of not really an option for us. But as you could see, we made some connections with the topic in terms of like global change, invasive species and so. But also what we did right at the beginning of the pandemic is we got together as a lab and wrote a paper about how can a lab research team become more resilient? What are the things that we think has prepared us to better deal with this particular circumstance? And so that made us all feel better because we connected with this topic that was on everybody's mind, and of course still is, because we contributed something. But it was very, very indirect, right? It still made us feel, we're contributing something. And so I think this was very good. And I think I'd encourage you to, do something similar to sort of search for current and upcoming crises that will happen. Unfortunately, think about some way you can connect with that, because then it increases the relevance of what you're doing in your daily work. And I think this is a good exercise to do. And we're currently thinking about this as well in other ways for the current crisis. But I think this is a very good way to cope with the situation. The second point is, periodically reassure yourself that you're working on an important topic. I mean, if you don't think you're working on an important topic, you're going to run into problems sooner or later anyway if you think what you do is irrelevant. So I think this is, of course, up to you in a way, to choose a certain topic where you have this relevance. And I admit that sometimes it's difficult to see in a particular project, a particular, thesis chapter, and seems always very detailed, and it seems like a very thin sliver of the science, and you're not really attacking necessarily the big questions, but you need to understand how your work is connected to these big questions. Maybe your slice of the cake is just this little slice, but you need to know the cake. You need to know the bigger narrative, the bigger story that your work fits in. For us, maybe it's about soil biodiversity. Seems like an exotic topic, but it's important to, maintaining soils in a sustainable way, to growing food. And so the connection to relevance for us is pretty direct, even though what we're doing is basic science. We're not working per se on like products to increase crop growth, let's say. But you need to be always aware of that connection. So reassure yourself of that connection, especially during these times, because we will still need to grow food, let's say, even if the world goes to hell in many other ways. But I think it's still going to be some basic needs. And so it is important that you make that mental connection. And especially important since, there's this daily grind. It seems like, why am I even doing this while, the world is suffering and whatever. But I think that this is important to connect with the big topic that you are actually contributing to in a small way, but you are contributing this topic. And I think this is very important to refresh periodically anyway, you know, to make sure you have this narrative in your mind. But it's especially important under these circumstances of external crises. Yeah, these are more the specific topics. Of course, there's more general topics. So, you know, for example, in your lab team, surround yourself with the positive people that can really deal with the situation in a productive way, and they do it well, basically. So don't surround yourself with the people that will drag you down, but surround yourself with the people in your team at your institute or university that will lift you up. So this is, of course, a good thing to do. Avoid that bad news paralysis where you're bombarded with an ever speeding up news cycle, basically, with all the different facets of bad news. You know, this may entail curating your Twitter feed or turning off notifications and reducing social media use, and also not reading the news all the time, you know, but busy your mind with other things like reading more generally about your topic, for example, to get that narrative refined that I mentioned just earlier, but avoid that bad news paralysis. And of course, watch out for your mental health. Exercise, in my case, I go on long walks, or sleep well, eat well, do all the things that are required to keep your mental health intact, because without that, everything else will not work either. And also invest in your community, in your immediate community. For example, the lab. Make that lab better. Make that lab more resilient. Help others because they may suffer even worse than you. Or one time you will be on the receiving end of the help, and the other time you will be on the giving end. And so I think invest in something positive around you would also be a good general piece of advice. Well, I hope that in the future there will be less of these things to worry about, but you never know. So I think it is important to think this through from your perspective of doing science. And I hope this was useful to you. Please let me know in the comments if you have additional points to add and what you think about this. And with that, thanks for watching. See you in the next video.